So this video is going to be about our final impressions of Athens, Greek. We are staying here for a month and this is we're coming into our final week now, so I think we've got a good idea of what we think of the city. So firstly, we're going to talk about the vibe. The vibe is good depending on where you are. So I think since the big financial crisis here in Greece, I don't know if there's maybe a loss of hope or whatever it is, or if it's always been like this, but people don't seem like overly happy here. I mean, we've encountered some very happy people, but as a general proposition, it's a very kind of, everyone kind of seems slightly more subdued or slightly joyless. That's not to say that our experience has been bad here, because like where we are standing right now, you can kind of see there are vibey places. Like this is quite cool with the restaurants that are outdoors and the weather is amazing. So with the weather being amazing, people generally flock to outdoor cafes, and it definitely makes it feel livelier when, you know, people are outside having cocktails or Aperol Spritz or whatever it is that they drink. But yeah, that is basically, if you go to the busier concentrated areas, there's a vibe. If you don't, there's a lot of like, you know, there's like 50% derelict buildings here, which has been kind of interesting, and a lot of graffiti, which kind of does change the feel of the city to a degree. But yeah, so that is my kind of impression on the vibe of Athens.
So, just gonna pop my ear so I get my inner monologue back, or else apparently I yell when I try to speak quietly. So, which is probably true. So yeah, so we're in Athens for a month, and this is our last. Well, we've just finished our third week here, so we've got 1 week left. Just a little bit of a background of why we're here for a month. Look, we like cities and we love cities, and we travel for food mainly. And the reason why we stay in Athens or in cities for a month is because Airbnb does a better nightly rate if you stay for a month. So sometimes you can stay 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and the cost of staying the month is actually the same. And so we, you know, then we decide do we take day trips or not. So we went to an island and all of that. But yeah, so I guess final impressions in terms of vibe in Athens. Personally, I like vibey cities, and I like cities that are busy, bustling, and hustle and bustle. And I'm finding that I found that after being here for 3 weeks, one, you have to go out and eat very late at night. If you don't, there is no vibe, right? There's no one around. It's very quiet. And secondly, Karen's already mentioned, I do find that yeah, look, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just like the GFC than COVID, but I've had quite a bit of bad service here from, you know, like from buying food over the counter in a lot of restaurants and stuff like that. And we've had good service, of course, but mainly, I mean, my personal feel is people have been a little bit rude and abrupt. I even got abused by a local for being a tourist and filming. So we've got an ASMR channel, and I just like filming, you know, the city sights and sounds, you know, and I literally got approached by a girl and abused, and she tried to take my phone and delete the video. So anyway, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but there is just a slight hostility to the vibe. I'm just gonna pull out my croissant and have a croissant. Yeah, there's a bit of a hostility to the vibe here, and a slight. I hate to sound negative about it, because we have enjoyed our stay here, don't get me wrong, and the food has been fantastic, and I'll go through that later, but there's a slight depressive vibe. That's all I say. There's a slight depressive vibe, like a subdued kind of depressive note to the city. There's just some final impressions that I have, but we're in the gardens right now. It looks beautiful. When you're in the garden and the croissant comes out, it's a beautiful day. So the next segment of the final impressions I want to talk about is transport, public transport. So here in Athens, there's quite an extensive public transport network. So you've got buses, subways and trams, and you buy an Athens ticket or ATH ticket, and you can buy a single trip, double trip, day pass, 3-day and a 5-day. And they're relatively reasonable, so you got to keep in mind that every time you ride one destination to another destination, that is one trip. So if you're going to need to take 2 trains or a train and a tram to somewhere, that's 2 trips, and then the return is another 2 trips. So just be careful. One trip doesn't mean a return, it's one segment of your trip. So yeah, so the day trip ticket is about €4, which is actually quite reasonable considering that it's a 24-hour ticket. You can ride as much as you want. The trains here and the trams are a little slower in terms of frequency than other places. So they're about, I think the trains off peak, they're about 7 or 8 minutes wait, and during peak it's like 6 minutes. Now it doesn't sound like a long wait, and it's not really, but in the scale of some other places, you know, it's 3 minutes to 5 minutes, so that's something to keep in mind. And the trams are even a little bit less frequent, so they're about 17 minutes from what we saw. But generally they're still pretty reliable, and we haven't had a time where our train got cancelled. And yeah, not bad, not a bad public transport network here in Athens.
Okay, so my favorite segment in our final thoughts of Athens is food. And what I thought of the food here was, I loved it. Like, we didn't have a single bad meal, and all my favorite foods can be found here. So I love deep fried calamari. I could have it every day. I love gyros. I love pita bread. I love tzatziki. I love octopus. I love feta cheese. So I really can't say anything bad about the food, and food is quite affordable. Like, if you saw our souvlaki video, you would have seen how cheap it is. And if you saw our street food video, you can buy a decent size gyros, which is under €3. So you can easily feed yourself for quite cheap here if you choose to do that, and if you are on a budget. But yeah, the seafood, if you love seafood, this is your foodie haven, because they just know how to cook seafood. I haven't had a single bad seafood dish here.
So my final thoughts on food, and also my final thoughts on value. Athens as a value as a destination in terms of value. So first, food. Yeah, we didn't really have a bad meal. You can come here as a very budget orientated traveler, and you can spend €2.80 to €3 on a good meal. But you can also spend €20 on a very fancy meal, and you know, it's really quite a diverse value proposition when it comes to the food. The only thing is that if you are a person who gets bored of Greek food or something like that too quickly, then there's not a huge diversity of food here. So it's a very monocultural society in terms of food. Actually, it seems like a pretty monocultural society here, like in terms of the general proposition of the culture. So, you know, you're not going to get very diverse types of Asian food, curries, and all sorts of different stuff. So a lot of the stuff that we get is very much Greek or Greek influenced or Greek preferred food. So that's one thing you've got to keep in mind, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, you are in Greece, so if you want to come here and eat, you know, Indian curry, well, it's like, well, you're not in India, you're not in Asia, you're in Greece, so you kind of understand exactly where they're coming from. So that's not a bad thing, that's just something that you got to note. So I mean, I have missed sweet and sour pork, and I haven't really seen them here, so you know, that's okay. I'll survive. Last thing I'm going to cover is Athens as a destination in terms of value. It's not a horrendously expensive place. You are paying with the euro, so of course the euro is always going to have a toll on currency exchange. So if you're coming from a country where the euro is way superior to your currency, then that's going to be a big deal. But in saying that, like I said, you know, public transport, unlimited day trips for €4. That's not too bad. That's actually not too bad. That's comparable to Bangkok. Food for for €3, you can have a solid meal. That's also relatively comparable to Asia, but you know, it's never going to be as cheap as Asia. It's Europe. You know, we're in Europe. But accommodation, it's not too bad. How much was our accommodation?
I think it was cheaper than Bangkok, but maybe a little bit more than Vietnam.
Yeah, so our accommodation was cheaper than Bangkok, but it is also much smaller than Bangkok. So I guess value for accommodation, you're not going to get as much value pound for pound here as you would in Asia, or in Asia. I mean, Asia is just so cheap, so cheap. Well, yeah, I mean, that's to be expected. You are in Europe. So, well, one of the segments that I'm going to cover today is livability. Okay, so livability, I want to explain to you what I mean by it. So, for example, when we went to Bangkok, after a month, we were like, wow, we can stay here another month. We can stay here 6 months, a year, and like we won't have an issue. It's so livable. Public transport is so easy. Everything is easy. Everything is available. So yeah, I mean, I guess I want to cover what I think the livability factor is of Athens. Now, where we're staying, it's not actually that far from the main city center. It's about 1.8 kilometers. But look, public transport, yes, they are a little bit, you do have to wait longer for them than most big cities, but they're not that widespread. You actually share a ticket for buses, trains and trams, and they're not, I mean, where we're staying, there's not really a way to get to the city fast. Like the buses are quite slow, so you have to really walk to the nearest subway or all the way to the city if you have to. And also as well, I guess, look, when you go to bars and things like that, like cocktail bars, I find that you pay very, very, what's a word? Very, very big city prices for cocktails and drinks at a bar, unless you go to a restaurant where you buy a beer for €250. So that's also something else. Like as soon as you go to a bar, you start to pay the big bucks for your drinks. So look, I mean, I wouldn't rate Athens to be the more livable city that we've visited so far. And also the fact that there is an open and quite a clear disdain for foreigners here, and that's another thing as well. So I wouldn't rate Athens to be my top, up there with my livable city. So yeah.
I'm going to talk about an unexpected surprise of Athens. And so I'm not sure if we mentioned, we've been here for a month now, and I think what was unexpected to me was how good the food is, and then also how easy it is to find good food. Because sometimes we have been to destinations where it has been a little bit like there's a really, really good food there when you find it or when you look for it, or you have to go to a very specific place to find extremely good food. Whereas here I feel we haven't had a single bad meal, and that to me was definitely an unexpected surprise.
So as a very last thing in this video, which is our final impressions of Athens, after being here 1 month, I'm going to finish it off with what I've found to be the biggest surprise of Athens. Now, a surprise is a surprise, whether it's positive or negative, but in my case, the surprise was a couple of things. One, how vandalized and run down, and in a lot of cases, unmaintained Athens the city is, and I didn't expect that at all. I thought it was going to be, a lot more maintained and a lot more cohesive, but no, it's like we live in quite a suburban area, about 2 kilometers from the main city fringe, some people would call it, and there's not a single surface where it has not been vandalized or damaged. And another thing as well is how the hostility towards foreigners and tourists, and you get vandalism. You've actually, ironic as it is, you've got like a lot of graffiti that's telling tourists to go home, or F off tourists and things like that. And that was a surprise to me. I didn't know that. I would never have guessed it or believed it until I've seen it myself. So those are the 2 big surprises for me here. And I'm not sure why that is, but there seems to be a hostility towards tourists. I don't know what it is, but anyway, Thank you for watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed our final impressions of Athens. See you in our next destination.